Good afternoon. Allow me to welcome you here. A few housekeeping information. Would you mind taking a seat? And please wear a mask in the room. At the rostrum, we don't have to wear a mask. We have 45 minutes to talk about the school system or schools in the 21st century. We will be focusing on some avenues, social inequalities, knowledge inequalities in schools. And this is a topic that is dear to my heart, dilution of knowledge and how. There's a kind of general relative approach, and there has been an anti-science offensive that we've barely witnessed in the past. So with our different speakers, they have an international approach to schools, to the school system. What can schools do so that our generations work together? Alain TRANNOY, the coordinator, a specialist in equal opportunities. Alain, the floor is yours. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, the Cercle des Economistes has chosen to devote a session to schools on Sunday at noon. So it does bear witness to the fact that we, the economists, we French people, we think that schools is a key topic, are a key topic. So allow me to talk about the school system, and I will take into account three challenges. So two challenges that have been there for quite a long time. So we have a public secular school that is free. It was implemented in the past at different dates. So equal opportunities, this is the first challenge, and it is connected with schools. If schools are free, it's because we want to create a bedrock of equal opportunities, and at each generation this challenge is being renewed because the environment is different. Young people are different to those of the past. The country is also different. The urban configuration is different. There are lots of ghettos, and it means that school is different to what it was in the 19th century. There's another challenge. We have to make sure that the school system contributes to the training, to the development of the citizens. It's not a matter of instilling knowledge and know-how in order to shape the society. So we need to train a citizen that will be a part of a society based on tolerance, sense of togetherness. So these are challenges that are new all the time. Society is changing, and the school system should understand the changes in society, and the school system should adapt itself to fulfill these two missions. I think that one of the key challenges that emerged in an acute fashion is that of the relationship of the country with scientific knowledge, scientific know-how. And at schools, scientific knowledge is being shaped, and Patrick has touched upon that topic. We may have some misgivings over the scientific problems and the way they are addressed in France. Allow me to talk about a poll that was conducted by IFOP in 2018 with the French, the Americans, and with the Germans. First question that was asked as part of the survey. Only 27% of French people reckon that they have a scientific culture, as against 54% for the Germans and 45% for the British and the Americans. So a 20-point gap. So if we look at the answers to a second question, do you think that we need to spend more time at schools explaining science, tackling scientific issues, 14% of French people have said no, no, we don't think that we should spend more time at school. 14%, that's not a lot, but this is the double of what the Americans think. So what is at stake here is how schools and this school system addresses knowledge and know-how. And of course, we could refer to Rabelais and Montaigne. So bombarding people with knowledge is a reality, but can we go further than that? And can we make sure that we instill a scientific culture? For any scientist, there's always a boundary, a scientific boundary. But below the scientific boundary, there are some established facts. And beyond, you have some assumptions. You have hypotheses. And I think that there are lots of uncertainties that will be dispelled as the boundary will move upward. So have we taught the scientific method to French people? Recently I've learned how Pasteur conducted a test in front of the British press in Dole in 1870 in order to test his vaccine against the plague. There were 25 cows, a control group, and there was a control group of cows, and he showed how the vaccine worked. This is something that I didn't learn at school. I wanted to end with this provocative note, and I hope that our guests will answer these questions. The attitude of schools vis-à-vis scientific knowledge and know-how. Thank you for setting the background to us. So, Jacques ATTALI, chairman of Positive Planet. So we are short of time, so I've summarized my talk in 10 points, so I will be very short. I've been given 5 minutes to speak. As Patrick said, the crisis has highlighted that education is important, and we've lost many students because they couldn't afford to continue to studies, and in 20 years' time we'll have fewer teachers, fewer doctors because of that. I'm very sensitive to the fact that we have this session. Over the past 2 days, we've talked about climate. Climate is a major topic, but there are many other topics that are significant. And if you consider the topics of the future, you have health, of course, and you have education as well. So these are three topics that are intertwined. This is the economy of life. And of course, it was said that we'll get green finance, but we should get educational finance, health education, and education that has to do with the economy of life. So we shouldn't stick to climate only. I think that young people should pay attention to climate, but they should be made aware of that. Second point, in many countries, education is facing a disastrous situation. And there is no sustainable society, no sustainable democracy without quality and fair education. When we look at the history, the countries that have developed themselves have a good education system, and we can draw a parallel between the different educational systems. Venice has become the heart because Venice decided to focus on education, and the same goes for Amsterdam. So there's a general collapse of the education system. There are many reasons for that, and there's a demographic reason, then a lack of attention, distraction, and people don't make many efforts. When we look at the history, we have to teach young people jobs that do not exist. That was not the case in the past. Today, I would say that it's a radical change, and we need to change the way we consider education. Fourth point, we need to talk about education, long life education, because jobs are changing. So we need to teach all the time. It should be a recurring process. Of course, we have school orientation in France. We need to stop that, and uh, and young people in the underprivileged neighborhoods will follow technical courses, but they don't learn on a permanent basis. So our school system should be open. Universities should work 24 hours a day, the whole year. And that's not the case of all universities today. Fifth point, if we look at the planet, I mean, there are huge needs and requirements. According to the statistics, in 2040, 2045, there would be 1.5 billion in the primary education, and that's huge. The figures are flabbergasting. So we need to consider the means that are devoted to education. The economy of life, 50% of GDP, it should be 90% of GDP. And growth will come from the economy of health, economy of education, and economy of climate. These are growth factors, and these are not burdens. It is said that health is a burden, education is a burden. That's not the case at all. I mean, these are growth-related factors. Of course, teachers should be better paid. I mean, if we have more pupils and students, I mean, we should have more teachers. You know that there's in some African countries, you have 100 students per classroom. So how can you teach when you have so many pupils? So we need to get more teachers who are better paid. So it means that we need to change how money is being earmarked. There's another change. It's important to focus on training. So training is not only for yourself, for oneself. Training is important for the whole society. I think that students shouldn't pay for their education, but they should be paid to be educated. There should be a student's income. And this is what I said earlier. We've lost quite a lot because this year in our country, in the universities, we haven't paid the students for not leaving the university. And in fact, they couldn't occupy some jobs to pay for their studies. Of course, eighth point, learning means working, repeating all the time, memorizing. This hasn't changed, but technologies will play an increasing role. It's been the case during the crisis. So you have remote education. Remote education has gathered pace. We have some head techs in many fields. And the ninth point that I'd like to highlight is artificial intelligence. The potential is gigantic, and we're still in an embryonic state. Artificial intelligence is key for tailor-made education for each student. I mean, this will come just around the corner. Artificial intelligence will help us better understand our brain. Neurosciences, they are still in their infancy, but they will move ahead with artificial intelligence. But beyond that, have a look at what is happening with distraction. We will be using distraction as a means of education, edutainment. So with distraction, there will be some holograms. So we'll have a teaching process that will be based on holograms. And the last point I'd like to touch upon. So what do we teach? A language, a culture, the basic, the fundamentals. So to be able to distinguish the truth, the scientific fact, an opinion, and a belief. These are three different things. The media have a role to play. Universities, schools have a role to play. The sense of togetherness, to be able to work with others and to learn how to create. So progress of humankind has to do with its raison d'être and the reasons why we are on this planet. Thank you. Thank you, Jacques Attali. Now, Claudia COSTIN is with us remotely from Sao Paulo in Brazil. Claudia COSTIN, she was the former education manager in the Getulio Vargas Foundation, and we'd like to thank her. And Jacques Attali managed to convince her, and she will be speaking French. Mrs. Costin, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will speak French. I'll try to speak scientific French. If we think about schools in the 21st century, we need to focus on sustainable development goals, and especially sustainable development goal number 4, whereby we need to ensure inclusive and quality education for everybody and promote learning patterns all life long. So it's not enough to ensure education for all, and that's significant in the developing world where I come from. There's a form of education is pivotal, i.e. with new learning educational patterns, not only for the people who are the most motivated, the young people who were born in affluent families. I mean, education for all is key. And the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is based around targets, whereby until 2030, and I would be talking about 2 targets, we will ensure that boys and girls finish primary and secondary education. Quality education is key. Hence, some learning and educational goals that are relevant and effective. So it's not simply a matter of going to school. People should be eager to learn. There were some educational shortcomings even before COVID, and COVID has led to tragic problems in countries where connection networks are bad, and in some remote areas education is very difficult. In my country, schools haven't been open for the past 18 months. That's a disaster. And there's another scourge that is worse. At the helm in Brazil, we have a populist leader, and the country has poorly handled the health crisis. Allow me to talk about another target, another sustainable development objective or goals, 4.7. I do agree with Mr. Attali, and up until 2030, we have to make sure that students and pupils acquire the necessary knowledge and know-how in order to promote sustainable development, sustainable education, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a non-violent culture. These are significant dimensions. But what is important is to promote global citizenship. We shouldn't be parochial. We need to think about the planet as a whole. So how education will change, especially when we talk about the future of work. I worked at the ILO. I worked on a report. I was involved in the Global Commission on the future of jobs, the future of employment. And regarding education, young people should be equipped with the skills, sophisticated skills, because of the advent of artificial intelligence. It will be a blessing and a curse. If I were to use the language of the Bible. On the one hand, artificial intelligence will replace human work in ways that we've never witnessed in the past. There is a shortage of intellectual skills, but people will have to think. Of course, students will have to remember by heart the knowledge that they've been provided with, but more than that, they should have to adopt a historic or scientific approach in terms of education. And many developing countries haven't followed that path. But technology can be a blessing because we can use technology to help and support teachers. So after COVID, I hope that schools will be transformed. You learn to learn and you learn to think. But of course, teachers will have to be better prepared and they will have to be better paid. It's a complex challenge to take up. Thank you. Thank you.
Now we're going to hear from a country that's invested in education. In fact, it even appointed an ambassador. I think that Birgit, you have the rank of an ambassador, special diplomatic representative for education for your country, Estonia. You have the floor.
From Estonia. By hearing this discussion today and yesterday, I would say that if education systems failed, they failed long before COVID-19. And the disruption just gives us clear sign that we have evidence now to move forward. And based on evidence and research, which was actually mentioned before, that we need data, we need feedback, we need evidence how to move forward. We have done a research in Estonia, so what we actually did good within 30 years that made us jump maybe a little bit ahead of different countries. But what are the 5 key factors that clearly can say we stand out? The first is learning culture, learning mindset. We have the saying that every Estonian is aiming high and working hard. So this is something that is in our DNA. It's coded in, and it has been coded for a long time. Second is the autonomous schools. So there's no decentralized system. It's decentralized, and schools have extreme autonomy, which gives them an opportunity, and it gives them responsibility. And it means that number one person in a school is the headmaster. Thirdly, the professional development of headmasters. The one who's responsible should have the best training and actually resources. Financial, flexibility to do the curriculum, and flexibility to hire the teachers. So the third point is the headmasters and also teachers' qualifications, and the importance of teachers were mentioned before, so I'm not going to tackle it longer. Fourth point is actually the strong strategical vision. It can be a little bit surprising, but we actually haven't shifted away from the educational goals we made on 90s. It's still the lifelong learning for all, based on one's abilities and one's needs. And this has been sort of like a baseline for different strategic views which like develop and enhance it. And maybe also for the strategic point of view, a little country like we are, only 1.3 million people, we have to be efficient. We lack resources, we lack human resources, we lack actually teachers, and we lack financial resources. Time we have as much as you do. But if we lack resources, we need to be efficient, and also efficient in prioritizing what we do in education. For example, it was mentioned that we rank high on PISA results. We have been high when we started to measure the results from 2009, and we remained high. The only thing is that other countries have fallen behind. And why we remain high is actually the strategic decision behind it. We have focused on low performers, so for equality and equity for 30 years. And it's only quite recent that we focus on excellence. So the talent programs are developing now. So far we have dealt with low performance. And the fifth point, which is also important, is instead of what to do, we focus on how to do. And it's actually the emphasis on implementation. So we don't really, even here, we don't disagree on vision, but we clearly have lack of understanding how to do that. And for our part, we emphasized digitalization of education, digital pedagogy, and also, which is really, really important, and for the final word, any digital interruption should bring on dividends, meaning digital should bring on board added value. Digital for the sake of replacing analog in education is a very bad decision. So the future indeed is done now and is done yesterday, so let's focus on implementation.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Last speaker. Speaking remotely, we have Stefano MANSERVISI, who's Special Advisor to the European Commissioner, Paolo Gentiloni, who's the Commissioner for Economic and Monetary Affairs. He's President of the World Fund for Community Engagement and Resilience, GCRF. Mr. MANSERVISI, have the floor. Thank you very much. I'm coming after the three preceding speakers, so there isn't all that much to add. I believe, however, that three different angles have been discussed. We've talked about a set of principles and guidelines. That was explained by Jacques ATTALI. Then we had a reminder of the global context and SDG 4. We've also heard the experience about the experience from another country like Estonia. What I would like to add is the following. It's the European dimension. In other words, we've been talking about a sort of standard set of values, which should underpin education and reform it, because education is in a state of crisis. We've also talked about responding to deep-seated changes and transformation. We have to prepare students for change. And in all this, I think it's quite striking to see that in a debate about strategic autonomy and European sovereignty, education seems to be left out of the discussion. I believe, however, that many matters that have been raised, how we can achieve better, do better as a whole in Europe, I think that the educational system counts. Jacques ATTALI at the outset said that at least 60% of students will be working in an area that doesn't yet exist. From an economic and social stance, the EU countries are closely bound up and must create these new job profiles. There's a sort of a vacuum. We have this new dimension, we have the economy of the future, and job descriptions in the future will be different from those that prevail today. And we must prepare for this. I'm not talking about technical education, I'm talking about just education per se. Education is still largely based on national principles. And I think this has led to a discrepancy between problems and the solutions proposed. The same is true of the basic values. We live in the EU, a group of countries based on diversity, but also common values. And there is this idea of European citizenry. And the aim is to facilitate both plurality and cohesion. So there seems to be a gap between values and the principles taught at school on a daily basis. Students, school children, find themselves at a bit of a loss because there is this huge discrepancy. What I'm trying to say, and to add to this debate, is that one of the solutions to bolster our ability to address the problems described, one of the means to achieve this is to make education less national. In other words, it should be more European and global in its approach, and not in bureaucratic terms, of course. It's necessary to broaden what is taught and the principles on which those curricula rest. Also, people often say we have a European model, we have our values, we have a societal model, we have a shared model. Perhaps we could use these common values a bit more in school and in the educational system at all levels. Of course, we have Erasmus granted, but that basically promotes mobility. I believe that curricula, teaching students how to feel European, and this is something that should be more shared. It's not a question of skills. I'm talking about real content, what you have in the school curricula. My point is that I think we should try to provide this more European dimension. Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes left. The organizers have said that we must at all costs stop at 1 p.m. So, very quickly, Jacques, do you want to react to any of the points raised by the other speakers? What about having a common base for education around Europe. Of course, Erasmus has to work properly. We need to have Erasmus for secondary school. And what we have succeeded in doing, thanks to the French initiative, the Bologna process, that is standardizing the 3 levels of higher education. We should do this in secondary education too. And that's a lot of work which will take up the next 10 years. Thank you very much, Jacques. Alain TRANNOY. Alarming messages have been issued in terms of the breakdown in the teaching system. It may be fairly global. Jacques ATTALI was also a bit alarming. He talked about the actual collapse of the system. However, there are solutions, and we've heard about them thanks to Estonia and the 3 points raised. I wish also to refer to decentralization, the decentralization of schools, and collective responsibility within schools shared by heads of school and well-trained teachers. I think it is necessary to have a clear strategic vision. Estonia focused first on children who were not doing well at school. The gap has decreased much. There was an 8% difference only in terms of the average, and digital means can be of great assistance. Jacques ATTALI has just answered Stefano and saying, yes, citizenhood is not just something that's national. It can also be European. And he's proposed an Erasmus program for secondary school. This is another proposal worth discussing further. It's obviously, we haven't been able to cover the whole of this topic, so I'm sure it will come back again in 2022 on our agenda. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous et merci à tous nos intervenants pour cette, je crois, dernière session.
I'd like to